Hello, everybody. I would say good morning, or at least it's good morning here in Belgium. I would like to, on behalf of VLIR US, welcome you all to the first edition of Community Talks this academic year. We're very happy to be starting again, and we're also very happy to be starting again with a very interesting subject. We have a group of researchers from the Stellenbosch University in South Africa and the KU Leuven here in Belgium. It is my pleasure to be introducing all of the researchers that are going to be speaking today. The title of this community talks is Moving Cameras, Evolving Stories, Challenging Environments, Creative Participatory HIV Research in Cape Town, South Africa. The speakers that are here present today is Ms. Lynn Hendrix, the Department of Global Health at Stellenbosch University and the Department of Social Sciences at KU Leuven, Professor Karen Hannes from the Department of Social Sciences KU Leuven, Mrs. Riska Dolly, she's a visual anthropologist at the Dolly House. I'm not sure if Rishan is here too. But I'll introduce him as well. Mr. Rishan Dolly is also a visual anthropologist at the Dolly House. Ms. Robin Julies, a registered counselor at the Department of Global Health at Stellenbosch University. And yes, I think with all of this said and done, I would just like to ask you to please keep your microphones on mute. And also please keep your videos turned off. This will help with the connection because we're in here with quite a lot of people. If you have any questions, there will be a 5-minute break in the middle of this presentation, but also afterwards we have a Q&A. So if you have any questions during this community talks, please send them in the chat and I will keep track of them and then we can address them at the end of this presentation. So with all of this said and done, I would very much like to give the floor to Ms. Lynn Hendrix. Thank you everyone for being here.
Thank you so much, Larissa, and thank you everyone for joining. We are so excited to share a part of our project with you and some of the learnings that we took away, as well as just, some insight to what this was like. So just some background for this project. It was something that, we planned and we looked at back in 2018. And now we are here in 2022, post-pandemic, post-babies, post lots of personal and, academic challenges that might have happened across the world. So we are very glad that you have joined us today. I'm going to share my screen. If you have issues seeing the screen, or if there are problems with sound, or anything that you may experience during this conversation, please pop your comments into the chat. Larissa will be watching it for us. And you are more than welcome to also post your questions as we are speaking into the chat, in case you forget them, or perhaps something comes up for you, or a comment. We'd love to hear from you and to engage with you through this conversation. So let me go ahead and share. All right. I'd really like to do a special welcome to my co-presenters, Riska and Robin and Karin. This was definitely a group project, and there are many members of the team that are missing today. So we think about all our participants that became co-researchers with us, people that assisted us in the field, our makeup artists, people that helped with the documentary, people that helped manage our finances. It was really a village project, and we are just here as communicators of what we accomplished in this project. So today we would like to look at some of the background, how we came to doing this project, how we approached it in terms of our value systems, how we incorporated and used storytelling in our fieldwork. We will talk through community investment and innovations that came from the community using participatory research methods. We will also touch on concepts like friendship intimacy and how that worked or did not work. And then we would also look at how we used film as a means of collecting data, but also disseminating data and using it as a conversation starter between multiple stakeholders. And then we will summarize with what we've learned about adherence to art for young people living with perinatal infections of HIV. And before I start, I'd like to say that this is a project that is funded by the Global Minds PhD Scholarship at KU Leuven. And we are really thankful that we were able to do the study using the funds that was provided to us. So let's go ahead and set the scene and why the study. How we came about this study was firstly for an evidence-based reason. So I've been working in systematic reviews with one of my supervisors, Prof. Taryn Young, for a few years on HIV research and what did we know in the existing qualitative evidence. What we found was that there were gaps in the particular group of HIV positive patients, which was young people. There wasn't a lot of information about how young people adhere to the treatment adherence, and we're going to call it art for the rest of this conversation. We then delved further into the literature, and we saw that there was even less information about young people who were living with perinatal infections of HIV. This means that they acquired HIV vertically, or they acquired it from their moms. So they were born, and at some point they pseudo-converted and became HIV positive when they were very, very young. We also, one of my reasons for doing the study and looking at adherence specifically was because I had experience living with taking daily medications, living with chronic conditions, and I know a lot of us have this experience, whether not personally or someone from our family. So when we look at adherence to art for young women, specifically with perinatal infections of HIV, these findings are also applicable to other chronic diseases that has associated stigmas for kids who are born with chronic conditions. And then also for an emotive reason, and this is why I chose the communities that I did, is that I wanted to give back to my community through my work. So using these reasons, we located our community here in Cape Town, and we used Wallerstein, Pontyville, Bishop Labus as our communities in Cape Town, for those of you that are familiar. And we looked specifically, because of the evidence and the gaps that were available, at young people living with perinatal infections of HIV. Now we know that when you take your medication, your art, your treatment, I see somebody's requesting a remote control. Maybe that's just an accident, so I'm going to decline. There are several things that happen when you are non-adherent or not taking your treatment as you should. You can experience treatment failure, which means that when you go back on your treatment, you could have drug resistance, so they have to increase your dosages. There are long-term mental health concerns. If you have illnesses that go up and down, and you know it has other side effects on the body, your disease can progress. You have earlier or high morbidity than others, and you're hospitalized more regularly than others. There's also an increased risk of onward horizontal transmission, meaning you can infect someone else. If you're adherent to your treatment as you should be, your viral load will be so low that it's basically undetectable. Okay, but it means that you have to take your medication as your treatment plan specifies. Now, it sounds very simple and it sounds very easy. You know, here's your medication, take one a day and you'll be okay. So what makes this so difficult? Why is it so hard for young people to take the medication? And we sought out to do that in the study, is to explore what is it that makes it so difficult for them to adhere, And how do we envision an enabling environment for young women that makes it easier for them to adhere to their medication? We looked at existing theories, and what we saw that there was a need for us to introduce a transdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approach to how we analyzed, investigated, explored, and looked at this problem. We looked at the theory of new materialism, and we used that to extend the biopsychosocial model to explore adherence. We also then added a second aim, which was to explore the potential of using participatory arts-based methods to conduct health research in vulnerable populations. So in the theory that we originally started with was the biopsychosocial model. It really looks at three main components: the biology of the patient or the person, which is the physical health, drug effects, or genetic vulnerabilities. It looks at the psychological aspects of the person, so coping skills, social skills, family relationships, mental health, and then also at the social aspects of the person. And when we look even further into, there's been more work done on the biopsychosocial model, where we introduce concepts like time, and we introduce concepts like the context, and how all of these start to work together. What we saw was that there were material elements that were emerging from our reading of the literature and previous work that we have done. For example, the context where people live, the containers that they receive their pills in, the blood vials that people see when they do their blood tests, the actual test that they take. It could be people in their environment. It could be side effects that is visible on the skin or in the body, and then the actual size, color of the pill. I mean, even in the interviews that we have, people spoke about, they don't like the color of the tablet. They don't like the size. They can't swallow it. It's so big. The container makes a noise. I don't want to show it. I hide it away. I take it out of my brown packaging because it's noisy. I don't like it when I have to go for injections or blood tests. And when you think about these things, it's not really something that we introduce into the theories that we are using when we look at adherence to art. We don't think about things that we generally think as common knowledge, that it would have effect on somebody, but these little things do add up. So we set off to explore, like, is there something that really is making a difference to how young women engage with their tablets? So what is the interaction between the space, the place, the things, and the health of young women? So in looking at new materialism, the way that we adopted this into our study is that we approached adherence as a non-linear phenomena. It's something where one thing doesn't affect another, which affects another, which affects another in a linear fashion. It's something that is dynamic, it's relational, everything is affected and can be affected. They are diffractive, they are non-hierarchical. And if I look at this, how these bubbles are all moving in between and with one another, that's how we envisioned adherence in the very beginning. Before, and this is basically how we hypothesized this, I guess, to be, as we set off to explore. So the first thing we did was looked in the literature. And I'm not going to go into, the ins and outs of the review. You are more than welcome to read the paper associated with this review. But we included 47 existing studies on adherence for young people. And what we found in this study was that treatment adherence has less to do with human preferences, motivations, needs, and dispositions, and more to do with how the bodies and viruses and things and ideas, institutions, social processes, structures, and how they all come together and assemble. What this evidence synthesis highlighted is that adherence to art for young people is a multi-sensorial experience. And what we found was that future research needs to rethink the linear and causal inferences we are accustomed to, and to adopt multidisciplinary approaches when addressing these issues. So using this and armed with this information, we then went into our field work. And when we approached the study, we adopted what we call the third sphere. And I think this diagram explains it very nicely. There's also a paper associated with this, which we can share a list of these publications with you after the call. But what the third sphere is, it's a physical or virtual space, and basically offers a time-out zone. So if you imagine this to be an elastic band, and you twist the elastic band, and then you untwist it. And what we have is two areas, the academic sphere and the community sphere, that then unband and come together in one space. In that space, it's not owned by anybody. Generally, in participatory research, we will invite participants in at a particular time and say, we want you to help us collect the data. But then we analyze it on our own and we present it on our own. Or we say, we want you to help us disseminate the data. So in this particular space, we are saying that you come in here out of your own accord. Everyone's invited in. Everyone is equally intelligent. Everyone has an equal responsibility. It's open to all to exist, and we all have a role to play. Okay, there is more to it, but you're more than welcome to read the paper. But the general idea is that it's an ideal exchange between the researchers and participants. It unfolds and folds again. But what we do in here is become allies for our research. So in the third sphere, some of the key elements is that there's no hierarchy. We start from a belief of equal intelligence. We exist as equal citizens. It's not owned by the participants or the researchers, and it's clearly separated from everyone's personal space. And it provides a relatively stable and durable context for shared activities. So when we thought about this third sphere, and this whole project has been an exploration and experimentation of the third sphere that we proposed back in 2019. But some of the values that are attached to this PhD and to the third sphere is that of transparency. So being open with what we are doing to all role players at all times. Allyship, equal intelligence, respect, constantly reflecting, and our acknowledging that there is interaction between ourselves and other role players in this third sphere. So an example of reflection throughout the project, all of us were called at different points to either be in a reflective modus with one another or alone. And we have records of everyone reflecting. It really helped us grow in the project, and it also made the insights very much deeper for us as researchers. Another aspect of this project was storytelling. So here are some of the storyboards that we developed in the literature and then translated into the fieldwork. And we will talk a little bit about this. First, I would like to touch on how we did this, and then we will move straight into the discussion. So in this project, and it's quite a big project, the way we did it was that we enlisted the names of potential participants from the clinic files at the clinics that we were allowed to go to. So then we sat with all the files, we checked if they met the inclusion criteria, and then we phoned them and asked them if they'd be interested in joining the study. We then met at the clinic to explain the study and ethics, and sometimes a parent joined one of the girls, and we completed all the consent forms. After that, we asked the participants if they'd like to go for breakfast or if they'd like to meet somewhere for us to get to know one another, and they were able to choose the location. And I'm saying having coffee and having lunch was one of the key things in this project, because it really helped with the conversation. It took away the whole interview feeling. After the get to know you interviews, and this is a chance for me to get to know them and for them to get to know me. So I physically would turn the tape recorder to myself and say, okay, you can ask me anything that you'd like to ask me and get to know me. After that, we would meet at our Tygerberg campus of Stellenbosch University, and we'd have an informal lunch just to check in. How are they feeling? What do they think about the project? Are they still interested? Can we take it forward? We would then set up a time to meet and to interview them formally using the tape recorder. And we also have art activities that they could do while we were doing the interview. It could also be anywhere. So either in nature, in a park, in a shopping mall, in a restaurant, at work. It didn't matter where the interview took place. We then met at the campus, so at work, because we needed to do the body mapping and community mapping with them. And we handed them a cell phone that they could use for the study. We then set up WhatsApp groups on their cell phone. So myself, Riska, who was responsible for producing the film, Robin, who was responsible for debriefing, and the participant were all in a group. So each participant had their own group with the three of us. On this group, they could upload photos, we could chat, we could arrange interviews, we could arrange anything regarding the study or simply to talk. They also uploaded their voice photos, and once we had enough photos, we would then invite them for an interview where they would do a photo voice interview. So we'd print the photos and they talk about them. Some of them preferred to draw in their journals or paste pictures out of magazines, and we use those. We then also did multisensorial interviews, either in their homes or at the clinic, where we would ask them to use their senses and bring to awareness the feelings that they experience in those places. After that interview, it's like the whole world opened up, because then the photos that they sent after that were very different. They started becoming aware of how the environment influences their experiences. We also did community footage recording. So either Riska, or myself would take them out and we would record while we were driving or walking. Everything was loaded onto the Dropbox or Google Drive. There was constantly debriefing with participants. We edited the video or the film. We then went for a weekend away with all the participants where they met one another. We watched the film. We used the storyboards from the literature to further refine their stories, and they could choose what they wanted in and out of the video for public dissemination. After that, we arranged an exhibition and a screening of the film with their families, community members, the clinic, government workers, healthcare workers, academics, researchers, politicians, and the like. So this whole process, the planning started in 2018. The actual field work was from January to August of this year. But the build-up and the planning took lots of time. So some of the key collection points was the weekend away we had with participants, the interviews we did in nature, the multisensorial interviews, the lunches and the coffees, and lots of information over WhatsApp, voice notes, and messages. In the end, this was our storyboard that we curated from the stories of our participants, from the literature. It is the findings of the study and the reasons why adherence might be difficult for young women living with perinatal infections of HIV. Here's an example of how we use the storyboards, and they added in their own information. You can see the boards are empty, and using the sticky notes, they've added in their reasons. So I would like to pause there, and I would like to share with you a clip of the video that we produced, and then we can take the discussion from there. I'm going to share my screen again. Can you please alert me if you are able to hear?
Yes, yes.
Okay. It's at the back now. I pull it something. And how many do you take today?
One at night.
One at night.
Like this is a very awful color. I don't know, I just don't like the color.
What would you prefer it to be?
A white one.
So let's take, can you take one out? If you could tell this tablet something, what would it be?
Cute.
A very small insert. And what she says, she would tell the tablet to cure her. So this film is about 40 minutes long. It is going to be available on YouTube from tomorrow. And we will share the link with you. We are very interested to hear what you have to say about it. What I really wanted to do was share with you an insight to how people experience the video. So perhaps I would, at this point, like to invite any questions so far from the audience.
Lynn, I think Kevin's hand is up.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, congratulations for presenting a very wonderful work. I really learned a lot from it, especially the methods of data collection. My name is Kevin Alciola from Kenya. I'm in KU Leuven, a student at KU Leuven, cadet student. So I have two concerns, and the first one is about buying lunch. So is this not giving them enticements or giving our participants enticements to give information? Are they not, this issue of buying lunch or maybe buying them some things, is it a way like, you know, you are preparing them psychologically that you see, at the end of the day, I need something from you? Or rather, to put it in another way, is that what is the scope of building rapport between the researcher and the participant? So how far are we supposed to go in that, as much as we are not also supposed to, like, give them something to make them to think that now they are obligated to give us information. That was the first thing. The second thing is about the photos. I heard you talk about enough photos. So I just thought of it. When or which determinants did you use to know that these were enough photos? Or what did you base on to know that now these photos, the photos that we have collected, are now enough for our study? Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kevin. I don't see any other questions, so perhaps I'll just answer these two questions and then we can go into the discussion with the rest of the panel. So thank you, Kevin. Those are really great questions. Let's start with the second one first. So in terms of the enough photos, what we did was the time varied between participants. Some of them sent us 10, 15 photos the very first day. And I would ask them, do you feel ready to talk about your photos? They would tell me no. Some would say yes. I would say, would you like to meet in a couple of weeks? Some of them would say yes. Some of them say, no, I still want to take photos of this. I want to take photos of that. It was really a decision that we made together. When our next meeting would be and which photos they would like me to print for them. So it wasn't something that I decided, but just a mutual decision that was reached that now we are ready to talk about the pictures that I took. Well, that they took. In terms of the buying lunch, I know that a lot of us see it as, I'm buying the participants something because I want something from them. The way I approached the study, and we're going to talk about this element of friendship and how far you go in participatory research in our discussion now. But when we approached the study, we saw it as building friendships with participants. So when I go out with my friends, I usually meet them for coffee, or we meet them for lunch, and we chat and we talk. It's impossible for me to go to a park for 4 or 5 hours and we're not going to be eating anything, and for us to conversate with one another. The other element is that a lot of them didn't have food at home. They hadn't had anything to eat in a couple of days. So it doesn't make sense for me for us to get together. And, it's a very emotionally draining process to talk about something as sensitive as your HIV status that you acquired from your mom, the emotional traumas that come up. It's a draining process. You need sustenance. You need things to keep going. If you haven't eaten in days, you are not going to be adequately prepared for that conversation. So it's more than just buying them lunch. Also, something to remember, when we had lunch together, they never ever saw me pay for it, even when they met with other researchers. We would meet at the coffee shop. Once we left, after they were long gone, I would go back to the coffee shop and I would settle the bill. It was a matter of us going there, eating, talking, and leaving. Or I would buy sandwiches or cool drink and keep it in my office. Or I would pack a bag and make sandwiches at home, or make burgers at home, and I would pack it in my picnic bag and we would go on a picnic together. So I think there are ways around it. You just have to be sensitive to why you're doing it and how you're doing it, if that answers your questions. So I see there's a question, did some people refuse? So only one person, after the first interview, she became uncontactable. We tried to contact her through the clinic. She just became too busy and she didn't want to participate any longer, but that was the only person. So thank you for your question. So let's go to our panel. If you could all please put on your cameras when you are speaking, or even now, so that we can see you clearly. And I'm going to stop sharing the screen. And let's start with the the first question, and I'm going to ask Karin to respond first, is around the concept of the third sphere, Karin. And you were with Chloe and we published the paper together, and Sarah. When we started imagining this third sphere and the elements of the third sphere, what was your thoughts around how we put it into practice into this project?
Yeah, I think actually you brilliantly outlined already, Lynn, what it composed of, some of its characteristics, including the non-hierarchical approach, the relational bit. So actually, a third sphere is some sort of a quest to a new relational ontology, I would say. But what we didn't touch upon in the presentation is why we even considered doing that. And I wanted to share a little bit about my own experiences of doing fieldwork. And it actually stems from the feeling that we often tend to come into a research setting, very often uninvited, with our own goals as researchers that we want to meet, most of the time very noble goals, but nevertheless our research usually tops on to the daily burden of many of the populations we actually work with. And in the same fashion, we tend to leave settings at our own call, at our own will. For example, when we feel things get rough or discomfortable or other priorities pop up, then we can leave that area. Our participants, on the other hand, or our co-creators, they cannot really escape their daily life reality. And in fact, when we engage with them, we might even introduce the risk of social stigma. And that often happens when they become associated in their community with a researcher from outside investigating HIV. So Lynn also said it's a space that is neither owned by us nor by them. And it's always created in some sort of a joint effort, but not always planned in advance. And that's perhaps in line with what new materialism would say. It is the sphere that actually creates the conditions for exchange, for dialogue. And we have been as close as sitting in a car together, driving from one spot to the other, and realizing that it was actually in that moment of driving through the landscape and sitting close to each other, that a lot of interesting reflections popped up. It could be as far as driving to the beach together. It could be in a coffee bar, but also in a digital sphere, such as WhatsApp, that is owned by all of us. You sort of align with the principle of meeting each other up in the middle of things, both in terms of, and then apply some sort of equal intelligence, both in terms of who initiates these discussions, guides, provides comments, makes decisions. But what I find interesting in the way you have worked, Lynn, in the field is that these relationships were really reciprocal. I think we gained as much from them, and we were also able to give something back. We allowed them to become movie makers with us. They co-created their own exhibition, and I feel that was really a joint effort where that flattened hierarchical principle was really felt there in the actual result that you presented to us.
Thank you, Karin. I perhaps want to pitch this and follow on that thought and pitch it to Risco and Robin. And perhaps they could share with us some experiences where the girls innovated their own ideas, where they said, can we do this? Or can we add this? Where they started coming up with ideas outside of us giving them anything. Risco and Robin, any of you can go ahead.
Okay, Robin, are you okay with me going? I think a lot of the ownership was handed over to them, and I think they really took charge of that. A lot of the suggestions came from, I guess, also the time that we invested and spent with the participants and the relationships that we created. So a lot of them offered to interview their family members on their own, and they did, and we included it in the documentary as well. They spoke to members of their community, and what was nice that came out in the end and the evening of the exhibition is that 2 of the participants actually brought people along from the community that whose kids who had then been suffering with HIV, and then the idea of the stigma that was attached to it, and that they'd never been open about their status. And that these people then felt that they were more acceptant of it after watching the documentary, and then also engaging with the participants.
So just to add on to that, participants, they were really, for me, in really co-creators, true sense of co-creators. So even in the relationships and in the debriefing, there would be moments where they would be like, Robin, how are you doing today? Are you okay? It's like, yes, thank you, but this is not my space. But in the relationship that we developed, as Lynn said, you know, about friendships, it became a true relationship, the contributions even to that. So it would be, they'd have different relationships with all of us, but in the debriefing, they'd bring things like, I think we can add some new pictures to the study, or I think we can do some voiceovers. Or what about if we do more art? Or, you know, I'd like to bring my journal. So those things really said to me that they have freedom in this space. And they created, you know, they would be like, okay, I think my grandma can also dance in a video. Let me send this video and let me see how this can contribute. That's a real video that actually exists because they had so much freedom. But yeah, their freedom in this really showed a sense of, I own this project as well. So yeah, I think that speaks to what Lynn was asking.
And so perhaps this would be a good time for us to maybe look at the concept of friendship intimacy, just as a follow-on for this conversation. I know, Karin, you know, in the beginning, we spoke about this a bit around friendships in participatory research. Would you like to comment on that? And I'm welcoming the audience to also, you know, raise your hand if you'd like to contribute to the conversation, or pop questions or comments into the chat.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. Always, each relationship in itself is a risk if you engage with someone on something. But as academics, what we should be wary about is that we often have the idea that a relationship actually follows the same track as our project. You know, we involve people at the start of a project, and then we end our relationships at the end of the project. And that sort of notion of building relationships in participatory research is utopian to me. Our projects might be bound in time and place, but our relations with our co-creators certainly are not, particularly when you work intensively with them. You build friendships, you build expectations. There's certain needs that are going from us to them or the other way around. And that doesn't stop when your report is finished and when you get your degree or your PhD degree, because then we have to ask ourselves, what do the others walk off with when our deadline is actually there? And that sort of explains why some of the participants felt somewhat emotionally disturbed when the project ended, because they thought it would also end their relationship with the project members who had given them through the project sort of a structure and a purpose. And I think with the right agreement between people, these relationships, they can continue, because stories and experiences, they will flow beyond the deadline, and things, thoughts will keep on circulating. So in that sense, some of the WhatsApp groups are kept open in the acknowledgement that the intensity of engagement perhaps might differ over time, but it's kept open until all people are comfortable to close them. And that is a necessity to build into your project, because when we start from the idea that all participants actually own the process, then they should also own the moment when things are coming to a closure for them. And sometimes that conflicts with the project-bound logic in which we need to work. And I think we need to raise awareness in young scholars and young researchers as well, that this is something that they need to take into account when making a choice in doing action research or participatory research.
Yeah, and I'd really like to comment on that. I think the exhibition, the finale, the grand climax of the project was a very emotional space for all of us. There were participants who were dealing with a range of emotions, to the point they didn't want to receive their portraits because they felt it meant I would forget about them. They would rather that I keep it so that I could look at their photo. There were some who were excited, that the end was here. There were some who were happy to see their outputs, but a lot of them struggled with this breakup, I guess, of the project. But I think what was important is that those groups were maintained open, because people process emotions at different times in different ways. I think it was just a few days ago that one of the participants sent us a message in the group to say thank you for the project, how she's grown, how she's changed, how things are different for her. But it took her almost a month post the project for her to come to that point where she can verbalize what she feels. Just today, I've got 3 messages in my Facebook inbox from participants asking me, how's my travel going? How's my baby doing? How are things with the project? They miss us. So I think for me personally, I don't see them as participants anymore. They are people who have a part to play in my life, just like I have a part to play in theirs. We're always going to be connected. So I think this friendship intimacy is something that not everyone might be able to do, because not everyone can emotionally hold random strangers in a project in this way. And it's something you must be prepared to do, want to do, prepared to do for a project, if you want to embrace the nature of friendship in your projects. Maybe Robin, you want to comment on this, because I know you were also very emotional in different ways, more stressed and drained from the emotional baggage that you were carrying.
Yeah. So my role was, as Lynn said, debriefing, but this often took place, when at night, late at night, so around 11, because they are young people, and that's sort of when their day dies down, and now they're ready to talk. So when I asked them, would you be available for 12 o'clock for debriefing, they'd say yes, give me a few sentences, but then at 11 p.m. they'd want to chat. So, it would be navigating, I am able to do this like I would with any person in my life, or no, not today. Let's touch on that tomorrow when I'm also able to give you all of myself, those kinds of things. But now post the project, towards the end of the project, there was a lot of distress among participants, like, how will we get in touch with you? Can I add you on WhatsApp? Can I add you on Facebook, Instagram, all of those platforms? And be like, but the WhatsApp groups are still open, but yes, feel free to add me. So now post all of that, I still have contact with them. They check on me, I check on them. I know for those who are in school, the exam period is almost over. They know about my master's thesis and where I'm at with that currently. So there is still that back and forth communication, and it has become a give and take. So in the thick of the project, I needed a bit more distance from participants because I needed to be able to debrief them. And sometimes I would need to assess, does additional psychological interventions need to take place, or what needs to happen? So my relationships with participants was very different from Lynn and Riska's. So I needed to navigate that, and that took doing. That was quite, for me, an emotional load, as Lynn said. But now post-project, our relationships has shifted. So it's more relaxed. It's a check-in. They are aware that if they need to, just say hi to a human that will be kind to them, they are able to do that with me. So a friendship is actually in the works post-project now.
Thanks, Robin. Thank you so much, panel members. I think now, because we are running out of time, let's go to the questions that are in the chat. So Larissa, do you perhaps want to let us know what the first question was?
Let's see. I wrote down some of the questions. Maybe there is one that is related to what you were just talking about. So maybe we need to do that one first.
Okay.
Someone asked, if you take away the incentives in the form of lunches and coffee, do you think the relationship built and narrated as the success of this project could have been realized without the lunches and coffee?
I can give a short reflection on that, which is in line with what Lynn also brought. I mean, the point is, what do we call it, you know? And that might be a cultural thing, but I never see a coffee or a lunch as an incentive. It's part of a common courtesy that you build up with any person you would speak to, whether they are a participant or your mom or the neighborhood that drops by. In my culture, it would be appropriate if you have a conversation around midday that you would go out for lunch, and often when you are the one inviting, then you pay. So we need to take care of, is it an incentive in the way that you put it into your ethical form as a risk that might imply voluntarism? Then you might have a problem. But that is not how we actually wrote it into the ethical form. We didn't put in there, we'll use lunch and food as an incentive. We said, like, we're building a safe, comfortable environment in which people can communicate with each other. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure whether that answers your question, but it doesn't, you know, it doesn't feel like I'm delivering an incentive at that point, if that's helpful.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know if any of you want to add to this statement.
I just wanted to add also, and I don't know how useful this will be, but I think because of the rapport we built with participants, and it was generally just we're all getting a coffee together kind of relationship. It wasn't, well, from my perspective, it wasn't, as Karen just said, an incentive. So often we'd have meetings for this person just wanted some kind of contact, and they didn't actually give any data, if you want to put it like that. It wasn't necessarily, today I'm seeing you and this is one of the sessions where you are going to give me some information and this is what we're recording. Sometimes it just would be, I would like a coffee with someone who is kind and who I know will support me because I'm having a rough time, and that's what that is. And sometimes it actually was a data session, and then they'd be like, I don't want to give you anything today, but can we just talk? And that was also okay, because that was the nature of the relationship. So it didn't feel in the space that it was an incentive.
Yeah. I have so much more to add, but in the interest of time, I am going to leave you with the sentiments of my colleagues. I agree with him 100%.
All right, maybe we can move on to like the more general questions that I've kind of combined from the chat. The first one is really general. This person asks, what is the main reason that women are more susceptible to HIV than men? Can you summarize it briefly regarding women's physiology, maybe in regards to AIDS fighting ability?
So there are multiple reasons, social reasons, for example, where women are more at risk for difficult sexual relationships or multiple sexual partners, sometimes due to economic reasons, but physiologically, the woman's cervix and her vaginal mucus, the area of the vagina is so much bigger than the penis that she is more at risk of contracting the virus biologically than a man because of how her sexual reproductive organs are made. And younger women who are under 17, they have an underdeveloped cervix, and they have less mucus production in the vaginal area, and they are even at greater risk than older women of contracting the virus. But I mean, on top of that, there are social and economic reasons that women are more at risk for HIV.
Okay, great, very interesting. Someone else asks, do you think this study can be replicated in other settings without much challenge?
Look, I must say, this was a dream project. We used the research funding that we received to its absolute maximum capacity. We used it ethically and responsibly, but it was a large amount for us to do the study. So, I mean, there are probably ways that you can, with low resources and less amounts, now that we've experimented and explored and seen what works and what doesn't work, there are elements that you can take away and adapt it in a low resource setting. So I would say yes, but there are certain things that are going to be difficult to do without funding, because there's the cost of the video, unless you have a researcher on board who is already funded elsewhere, who has the ability and the skill to make, home video footages or films from your data. I really think you need to just think very wisely about it. So my answer is yes and no. In the study, we were experimenting with the concept of the third sphere. We were looking at what works and what didn't work. And as with RCTs, they are usually expensive the first time around to see, do things work. But we'll have to wait for the write-up of the paper for you to adapt it. Yes, Karin. Your mic, Karin.
I just wanted to quickly comment on the idea of the challenge and how you could take that away. I don't think you take it away. What we can transfer to other research settings is part of the strategies and the tactics that we have developed in working in challenging circumstances or with challenging populations. And those can be shared and those can be used actually in other settings. But you never take the challenge away. A co-creative project is by nature open-ended. You don't decide in advance. You can't plan in advance even, because the decisions are actually shared. So it's very open from the beginning. And if that's something that doesn't fit your personality or doesn't fit your timeline or gives you a certain amount of stress, then perhaps more closed research projects where you are more in control could be a better match. On the other hand, it's much more rewarding to actually be simultaneously in the demanding seat, but also in the receiving seat, which is something that in co-creative messy problems of participatory work is the most appealing bit to me.
Thanks, Karin. Nicely summarized.
Great.
I think, I know we're out of time, but there is a 30-second clip I would love to play for everybody just as the end. So this is a clip one of the participants at the exhibition made on a social media feed. So I'm going to share it with everybody. It's very short. Let me share my screen. Can you hear?
Yeah.
The sound is missing for this bit, but it will come back.
I attend things like this and I go home and I can't verbalize, I can't explain to my mother what I attended, you know, what were the findings. But after watching this, I know I'll be able to go home to my mom and I'll be able to explain to her, you know, this is what I watched. And I think that's very important in breaking down these ivory towers in academia. Another thing is academics are notorious for loving their own voices. And this was the participants or the co-creators' voices. That it was purely that. And I applaud you for that. Thank you.
Thanks. Reformulating drugs.
Thanks, everyone. That is all we have for today. We will be sharing the details of where you can see the video online, as well as my email details. If you have any further questions or things you want to discuss, you are more than welcome to contact us.
Yes, I will make sure to also include your information in our follow-up mail that we'll be sending. So again, on behalf of VERUS, and I think on behalf of everyone here present, I would like to thank all of you very, very much for presenting your research, for presenting this project. I feel like it is a type of research that is not that common in academia, and it's with such a personal approach that is necessary with research like this, with a topic like this. And yes, that's why I think this is the perfect example of a VERUS project where it's not only about the research, but it's also about the people, about the community, and kind of making the world a better place, no matter who is in it. So I would like to thank you once again. And I would also like to tell everyone in the audience to look out for our next community talks at the end of October. That one will be about mycotoxins, an insidious problem from human health in northern Uganda, which is a project together with the University of Ghent. So thank you so much also to the audience for being here, and we'll definitely keep in touch. So yeah, thank you once again.
Thanks so much, everyone. Bye.